Hey, this is Liam, your narrator. Just want to say a very quick thank you to all of you listening, watching, commenting, liking, subscribing, sharing, and all of that good stuff. It really helps out the channel and is much appreciated and very encouraging for me. So with all that said, let's get into the story. I've always been a fan of the London Underground. As a lifelong Londoner, I've come to appreciate the convenience and punctuality of the tube. But I never thought I'd experience something so horrifying that it would change my perspective forever. This is the story of the night I encountered the supernatural on the Circle Line. It was a cold, damp November evening. The air smelled of damp earth, and the streets echoed with the sound of rain tapping against the pavement. I was on my way back home from a late night shift at the office, and I made my way to Aldgate Station. As I descended the escalator, I noticed how eerily quiet it was. The station was practically deserted, and the only sound that filled the air was the low hum of the escalator. The usual buzz of conversation was absent, and I couldn't help but feel a chill down my spine. I checked the departure board and saw that the next Circle Line train towards Edgware Road was due in a few minutes. I took a seat on a cold metal bench and tried to ignore the unsettling atmosphere around me. As I sat there, a faint, unpleasant odour wafted through the air. It smelled like a mixture of mould and wet dog. I glanced around, trying to pinpoint the source, but there was nobody nearby. I dismissed the smell as a byproduct of the damp weather and went back to waiting. When the train arrived, I boarded and took a seat near the door. The carriage was dimly lit, and the flickering fluorescent lights did little to dispel the darkness. There were only a handful of passengers aboard, each of them minding their own business. As the train pulled out of Aldgate Station and the familiar rhythm of the wheels on the tracks filled the carriage, I tried to relax, but the unsettling feeling that had plagued me since I entered the station persisted. We reached Tower Hill and a few passengers got off, but no one boarded. The smell from earlier returned, stronger than before this time. It was becoming unbearable, and I glanced around to see if anyone else noticed it, but everyone else seemed oblivious, lost in their own worlds. Suddenly, the train jolted violently, and the lights flickered even more erratically. A hushed, tense silence fell over the carriage. A woman, sitting across from me, clutching a shopping bag, whispered nervously, "What was that?" Before I could answer, an announcement crackled over the speakers. "Apologies for the disturbance, ladies and gentlemen. We are experiencing technical difficulties and will be stopping at the next station, Monument, for a short time." The train slowed to a halt, and I couldn't help but feel relief at the prospect of getting off and escaping the oppressive atmosphere. The doors opened, and the few remaining passengers, myself included, quickly disembarked. I decided to wait at Monument Station for the next train. As I paced the platform, the smell from the train seemed to follow me, growing stronger and more nauseating with each passing minute. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the reassuring glow of the platform lights. After what felt like an eternity, a new train approached the platform. I hesitated for a moment, the dread from earlier still clinging to me, but ultimately boarded. This time, the carriage was brightly lit, and the smell was absent. A wave of relief washed over me, and I sank into a seat, finally able to relax. As the train pulled away from Monument, I glanced back at the platform. There, standing alone in the shadows, was a figure. It was too dark to make out any features, but I could see that it was tall and impossibly thin, with elongated limbs that seemed to defy human proportions. The figure's head was cocked at an unnatural angle, as if it was watching me. A shiver ran down my spine as I realised that the smell had returned, stronger than ever before. I couldn't turn away from the figure, and as the train gathered speed, it seemed to glide along the platform, keeping pace with the carriage. Panic set in, and I stumbled to my feet, suddenly desperate to get as far away from the window as possible. A man sitting nearby noticed my distress and asked, "You right, mate?" I could barely get the words out, but I managed to stammer, There's something out there." He glanced out the window, his brow furrowing in concern. "I don't see anything," he said, trying to reassure me. But I could still feel the figure's presence and the putrid smell that accompanied it. The train hurtled through the tunnels, and as we passed through each station, I could see the figure waiting on the platform, always watching, always keeping pace. I felt like I was losing my mind, and my heart raced in my chest. Finally, we reached Edgware Road Station, my stop. As the train slowed to a halt, I hesitated, unsure if I should get off or stay on the train. The man who had spoken to me earlier placed a hand on my shoulder. "Go on," he urged gently. "Whatever it is, you can't let it control you." I took a deep breath, gathered my courage, and stepped off the train. As the doors closed behind me, I dared to glance backwards towards the platform. The figure was nowhere to be seen. The smell, however, still lingered. As I made my way home, the unsettling feeling that had accompanied me throughout the night refused to dissipate. I knew deep down that I hadn't seen the last of that haunting figure from the Circle Line. From that night on, I could never again look at the underground in the same way. The once familiar tunnels now held a sinister secret, and the haunting memory of that chilling encounter would stay with me forever. The only consolation I could find was that I never again saw the figure. But the smell would return from time to time, a cruel reminder of the terror that lurks beneath the streets of London. The old clock tower's pendulum swung back and forth, marking each second with a sinister creak. The dark, ominous clouds rolled over the city, casting a perpetual gloom upon the dreary streets of London. It was a night like any other on the London Underground, with commuters rushing to catch the last train home. However, little did they know that the sinister grip of an ancient malevolence would soon encroach upon their mundane lives. Joseph, a tall, lanky man in his mid-30s, stood on the platform, waiting for the train that would take him back to his empty flat. He was a quiet, introverted man, the last to complain about the weight of loneliness that bore down on his soul. As the train approached, a sudden gust of wind swept through the station, carrying with it the chilling whispers of an unspeakable presence. The train screeched to a halt, and the doors opened with a hiss. Joseph boarded and sat in a corner seat. He noticed a woman across the aisle, her dark eyes fixated on him with a piercing intensity. He shifted uncomfortably under the gaze and looked away. Just as the train began to move, the woman rose from her seat and approached him. She leaned in, her breath cold against his ear, and whispered, "Beware the spirit that follows you. It hungers for your soul." Joseph's heart raced, and he glanced back to see that the woman had vanished. He tried to shake off the eerie encounter, attributing it to his overactive imagination. As the train descended into the darkness of the tunnels, flickering lights cast sinister shadows on the walls. Joseph felt a cold, clammy hand grip his shoulder, and a voice thick with malice hissed into his ear. "You're mine now." The grip tightened, and Joseph's world turned black. When he awoke, the train had come to a stop at an unfamiliar station. He stepped off, his mind foggy and disoriented. He wandered the empty platform, desperately seeking a way out, but the darkness seemed to close in on him. Suddenly, he heard footsteps echoing through the tunnel, and a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, dressed in tattered Victorian-era clothing, his face pale and gaunt. "Who are you?" Joseph asked, his voice trembling slightly.
"I am the one who now inhabits your soul,"
the man replied, his voice a chilling blend of elegance and menace.
"Once I was a man of great power and influence, but my lust for more led me to make a pact with a demon. Now I'm cursed to wander this world, seeking a new host every 100 years.
Joseph's legs buckled under the weight of the revelation. "Why me?" he cried, his voice echoing through the darkness.
"You are a man of untapped potential, Joseph,"
the spirit replied.
"Your loneliness and despair have made you vulnerable to my influence. Together, we will achieve greatness, and you will know power like you've never imagined."
The ghostly figure advanced towards Joseph, and the air grew colder with each step. As Joseph's vision blurred, the spirit's voice continued to echo through the darkness.
"I will give you what you've always desired. The power to command and the strength to rule. But in return, you will surrender your soul to me."
As the spirit reached Joseph, he felt an icy chill course through his body. The spirit of the man merged with his own, and the darkness enveloped him. He could feel the spirit's sinister energy coursing through him, his mind clouded by malevolent thoughts and desires. In the weeks that followed, the city of London was plagued by a string of inexplicable events, each more disturbing than the last. Unsettling whispers filled the underground, leaving passengers feeling uneasy and paranoid. Reports of bizarre accidents and inexplicable deaths increased, leaving the city on edge. Joseph, now possessed by the evil spirit, found himself at the center of these occurrences. The spirit's malevolent influence seeped into every aspect of his life, driving him to commit unspeakable acts. As the darkness consumed him, he began to lose control, the distinction between himself and the spirit fading with each passing day. Desperate to regain his humanity, Joseph sought out the woman who had warned him on the train. He was lucky to find her in an old, crumbling church, praying fervently before a flickering candle. "Please," he begged, "help me break free from the curse." The woman, her face etched with sorrow, replied, "There is but one way to free your soul. You must confront the demon that binds you and sacrifice your own life to sever the connection." Joseph, his heart heavy with despair, agreed to the woman's advice. He returned to the station where it had all begun, armed with nothing but the resolve to reclaim his soul. As he stood on the platform, the spirit within him stirred, sensing his intentions.
"You fool! Do you truly believe you can resist my power?"
Determined to end the curse, Joseph walked to the edge of the platform, his heart pounding in his chest. As the train approached, the spirit's grip on him tightened, fighting for control. With a final desperate act of will, Joseph hurried himself in front of the oncoming train, the spirit's enraged screams echoing through the darkness. As his life slipped away, Joseph felt the spirit's icy grip loosen. The darkness that had consumed him began to fade, replaced by a brilliant, comforting light. As he drew his last breath, a feeling of peace enveloped him, his soul finally free from the demon's grasp. News of Joseph's death spread through London, and the strange occurrences that had plagued the city ceased. The people, however, would not forget the chilling tale of the man who had been possessed by an evil spirit, forever linking their spirit to a dark and brooding supernatural legacy. The old clock tower continued to mark the passage of time, and the London Underground carried on, of course, its tunnels haunted by whispered echoes of a man who had paid the ultimate price for freedom. And in the shadows, the spirit, weakened but not destroyed, still bides its time, waiting for a new soul to prey upon. It was a gloomy Thursday evening as I made my way to the London Underground, my usual mode of transport. I was heading from Waterloo Station to King's Cross to meet some friends for dinner. Little did I know that this routine journey would turn into the most chilling experience of my life. As I descended the steps to the Jubilee Line platform, I noticed that the station was unusually quiet, with only a few passengers scattered about. A feeling of unease washed over me, but I shook it off, attributing it to the late hour and my imagination. The train arrived and I jumped on, finding a seat near the window. The carriage was dimly lit with the overhead lights flickering occasionally. The few passengers in the carriage appeared fatigued, their faces buried in books or illuminated by the glow of their phones. As the train pulled away from Waterloo, I noticed a young girl standing near the door at the far end of the carriage. She looked to be about 9 years old, wearing a white dress with a blue ribbon in her hair, dark and curly. Her eyes were wide and she seemed to be staring into the distance. There was something unnerving about her, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. As we approached Southwark Station, the girl turned her gaze towards me, her eyes empty, filled with a sadness that seemed far too deep for someone her age. The train slowed to a halt and the doors opened, but no one got on or off. The girl continued to stare at me, her expression never changing. Feeling increasingly uneasy, I tried to ignore her and focused on the scenery outside. The train passed through the dark tunnels, the sound of screeching metal and the rhythmic thudding of the tracks filling the air. No matter how hard I tried though, I couldn't shake the feeling of the girl's eyes on me. As we approached London Bridge Station, the girl began to move. She walked slowly towards me, her steps eerily silent. She stopped just a few feet away, her hollow eyes never leaving my face. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice wavering. "They won't let me leave," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I just want to go home." The train's brakes hissed and we pulled into King's Cross Station. The doors opened and I stood up, feeling an overwhelming urge to escape. I tried to leave, but the girl grabbed my arm, her grip icy cold. "Please, don't leave me," she begged, her voice filled with desperation. I hesitated for a moment, torn between my desire to flee and my sympathy for the girl. But as I glanced around the carriage, I realized that no one else seemed to notice her. It was as if she was invisible to everyone but me. Feeling a sudden surge of courage, I took the girl's hand and led her off the train. As we stepped onto the platform, her grip tightened and a faint smile appeared on her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the bustling station noise. As we walked towards the exit, the girl began to fade, her form becoming translucent. Within seconds, she vanished completely, leaving only a cold breeze in her wake. I never saw the girl again, but I often think about her and the mysterious circumstances that trapped her spirit on that train. To this day, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I had ignored her pleas for help and left her to wander the dark tunnels alone, forever lost. The encounter with the ghostly girl on the train changed my perspective on the unseen world. I started to research similar stories, and I found that many others had encountered her or other restless spirits in the depths of the tube network. Some say they're the remnants of passengers who met untimely ends, or the souls of those who suffered tragic accidents during the construction of the underground. I never did find out who the girl was or why she was trapped there, but her presence has left an indelible mark on my soul. I hope that by helping her, I was able to bring her some semblance of peace and guide her towards the light. Now, every time I ride the London Underground, I can't help but look around for signs of the girl or other lost souls, hoping to offer them the same assistance that I gave to the girl that fateful night. And as I journey through the dark tunnels, I'm reminded that sometimes, even in the most ordinary places, extraordinary events can unfold. Growing up in London, I'm so used to getting on the underground, but I've heard countless stories from other passengers who've experienced strange things. I've always been intrigued, but I never thought anything of them really, just tall tales. Until one evening, I was taking the Piccadilly line from King's Cross to Heathrow Terminal 5. The platform at King's Cross was unusually quiet, with only a handful of passengers waiting for the train. The dim lights flickered occasionally, casting eerie shadows on the walls. As the train arrived, the screeching sound of metal on metal filled the air. I got on the train and took a seat near the door. The carriage was mostly empty, save a few passengers who seemed to be lost in their own thoughts. As the train pulled out of the station, I noticed a woman sitting at the far end of the carriage. She was wearing a dirty, tattered dress and had long, messy hair. Her eyes were hollow, and she stared at me with an unsettling intensity. As we passed through Caledonian Road, I was trying to ignore her, but I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The train rattled and swayed, the sound of the wheels echoing throughout the carriage, the flickering lights casting an ominous glow on the woman's face. Suddenly, the woman stood up and started walking towards me, her movements jerky and unnatural. I felt my heart race as she got closer, her unblinking gaze never leaving my face. And in a voice that sent shivers down my spine, she whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I wanted to reply, but my voice failed me. I couldn't tear my eyes away from her presence suffocating me. The train arrived at Holloway Road and the doors opened. To my relief, she stepped off the train, but not before giving me one last bone-chilling glare. The doors closed, and I let out a sigh of relief. The train continued its journey, and I tried to shake off the eerie encounter, but as we passed through Arsenal Station, I heard this guttural growl in the distance. The temperature in the carriage just dropped, and I saw my breath in front of me. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its twisted form barely recognizable as human. It was the woman, but she had transformed into something monstrous, her eyes glowing red, and she bared her sharp, inhuman teeth at me. The other passengers screamed and scrambled to get away, but the demon was relentless. It lunged at a man, tearing into his flesh with its claws, blood spraying across the windows, and the metallic smell of blood and rust filled the air. I stood up and tried to make my way to the door, but the demon noticed me and hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "You cannot escape me!" My heart pounded in my chest as I desperately tried to pry open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The demon advanced towards me, each step more terrifying than the last. The train screeched to a halt at the final stop, Heathrow Terminal 5. As I accepted my fate, the demon lunged at me and everything went black. And now I'm trapped on this cursed train, forever doomed to ride the Piccadilly line with the demon that haunts it. I'm a prisoner in this metal tomb, destined to bear witness to the horrors that unfold before me, with no hope of escape. If you ever find yourself on an empty train, late night on the Piccadilly line, beware the demon that roams these carriages, and if you see a woman with hollow eyes and a tattered dress, leave immediately, or you too may become a part of this nightmare. With each new passenger the demon claims, its power grows stronger. It feeds on the fear and pain of its victims, and I can only watch helplessly as it continues its reign of terror. The once bustling London Underground has become a hunting ground for this malevolent force. Rumours have spread through the city, but many still remain ignorant of the danger lurking beneath their feet. And so I write this as a warning, in hopes that others may be spared from the same fate. Heed my words. Avoid the Piccadilly line at all costs, especially when the night is dark and the train is empty. Because if you dare to venture into the depths of this haunted underground, you may find yourself forever bound to the demon's twisted domain with no hope of salvation. And as I continue to endure this endless torment, I can only pray that my tale reaches those who still have a chance to escape the clutches of the demon that haunts the London Underground. Hey, it's Liam again. This is a little Easter egg for all of you who have stayed right up until the end and listened to all of the stories. Big thank you to all of you. And I look forward to sharing more stories with you very soon in the next video. Take care.